Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast, coming to you live on location from your current side quest. I'm your host, Justin.
And I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the podcast. We've got a good bit to talk about today. We've got some Formula One off-season notes, a race review, classic race review. We've got a little bit of League of Legends roster moves, some Magic the Gathering. Holy cow, stuttering today. But Justin, it's always good to see you. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good to see you too. Honestly, it feels like kind of just a blink of an eye since I last saw you. Time moves pretty quick here in the warp. But yeah, good to see you, sir. Excited for another episode. Actually, kind of an interesting classic race review that we chose here for this week, going back to 1993 Europe. So I'll be excited to get into that. But yeah, before we kind of get into the meat episode, Aaron, tell me about your week. Give me your rose, thorn, and seed. Tell me how you've been, sir.
Sounds good. I've been doing pretty well. It's I feel like I've gotten caught up on a lot of things I needed to at work, so I'm like more comfortable with how things are. Life's good. Senna's good. Colleen's good. Today is. This is going to sound super probably cheesy, but at some point Colleen and I were watching 500 Days of Summer, and we figured out, she figured out and put it in our calendar of when we would have been dating for 500 days, and that happens to be today. And we call it 500 Days of Goob, because we're both a couple of goobers, and that's kind of our cheesy joke back and forth. So, yeah, life is just generally pretty good.
Isn't 500 Days of Summer? Isn't it only 500 days because it ends and and he's sad?
It does. So this is the end of the line.
Damn.
Tomorrow we'll go our separate ways.
Damn, end of an era. Who gets the apartment? Because that thing is sweet.
Whoever gets the apartment does not get the dog, so that's the trade-off.
Oh, all right, fair enough.
No.
Well, at least it's amicable. That's cool.
Yeah. But no. So life is good. But my roast for this week, it was just a pleasant surprise. Kind of. I was at work and something came up with appliances, and I ended up having to call the company we order appliances from, which happened to be one of the ones that I used to do that all the time for my last company, and the person who helped me is someone who I had worked with quite often there at the company and everything. And she remembered me. It was like, oh my gosh, like, happy holidays. I hope you're doing well and everything. After confirming that I was the same person who she had previously worked with. And so it was just kind of cool that she remembered me. I remembered her too. I was like, oh, it was nice to hear, like, a friendly voice and like someone who I used to work pretty frequently with exclusively over the phone. So it was just a neat coincidence.
Oh, wow. That is pretty cool.
Yeah. And I mean, of all the people that I could have picked up the phone or whatever, it was just nice to like have someone I knew and also knew that they did like well at their job, so they were going to help me out with no problem. So solid little surprise today at work. My thorn for this week is just that it's getting a lot colder, so all the taking the puppy outside at night and everything, having to throw on a jacket and all is not the most fun, but I'm just less looking forward to having to deal with inclement weather. Snow and sleet and freezing rain are not fun to drive through or work around, so yeah, I'm just not super thrilled, but that's that time of year.
Yeah, it does. It does make that element a bit of a chore. Where, like, when it's warm out, you can just walk out whatever you have on. You just gotta slap the shoes on. But yeah, it is more of a process. You got to put some more layers on. You got to grab the gloves, put the hand warmers on, get the ear muffs.
Oh yeah, it's definitely just like an extra like task to having to
Hmm.
go out in general. So
For sure.
it's and slows you down. And when you have a little puppy who needs to go out when they need to go out, that's you got to kind of speed run it. It's like
Hmm.
a fireman where they have their overalls and boots and everything just ready to go. I
Oh, there you
constantly
go.
have like shoes by the door, one of my beanies right there, so I just like run, grab them, throw them on, and get going.
There you go.
So
Keeping it
that's
safe for everybody.
yeah, trying to keep myself warm too.
Hmm.
But that's just kind of my thorn. Nothing too crazy. And my seed for this week is that as the holidays are coming, I'm getting pretty close to being completed with my Christmas shopping. I'm usually a pretty big procrastinator, and some people would probably say, Aaron, Christmas is in 11 days. You are a procrastinator, but it's more time than I had usually previously been finishing my shopping at. So I'm excited for giving those gifts, and that I'm like pretty much done ahead of schedule for myself at least. So
Yeah, so then an added headache on that, on the week of or the days leading up to is not, oh well, now I got to get down to Boscov's or whatever to get a pair of shorts for somebody.
yeah, and I'm like I've always been so bad that I would just um like wrap everything on Christmas Eve. So
Yeah.
I would stay up till I don't know, like 1, 2 in the morning sometimes, just like wrapping presents. Once I was like high schoolish age at least, and
Hmm.
just like being up way later than I needed to be just because I didn't do it ahead of time. So I'm like just glad that I'll have that kind of crossed off my list. So
Yeah, so you were Santa Claus, man, up into the wee hours getting those presents ready.
basically, yeah, sneaking into the
Wow.
living room while my parents were asleep to like put the presents under. So I kind of reverse Santaed it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe we're all Santa Claus. Hmm.
Was this a Hallmark movie?
Could be.
But yeah, that's my rose thorn and seed for this week. But how's your week been? What's been going on?
It's been going pretty good. Kind of light week this week, but I'll give you my rose, thorn, and seed here. So pretty interesting seed. Friend reached out to put like a board game day together. I guess he got a new one for his birthday, and so he's excited to try it out. It sounds like it's basically like a MOBA in board game form. So I think that's why he asked me, just for my years of playing League of Legends.
Nice.
So I think we've got that slotted in for sometime in January. So I'm actually really looking forward to it. Last time I heard from John was for man, I can't even remember it. Like it was a decent bit ago. So yeah, I think it'll just be fun to sit down, play some games with everybody, and learn something new. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. My
Is
thorn
it
here. Go
is it
ahead.
like a 5v5 then if it's a MOBA or
I think it's 3v3 in
okay.
some way. I don't know what the map looks like. It's Guards of Atlantis 2 is the title. I haven't looked anything up. I don't know if I'm supposed to, if I should. I was kind of thinking I was going to go in blind. I didn't want to like metagame it at all.
I feel like
Like
you'll figure it out if you go in blind.
yeah, and I don't really want to.
Worst
Yeah,
case, you like do a quick trial run game and then like hop into a full length game. I wouldn't, yeah,
right.
I wouldn't stress too much about figuring it out ahead of time.
Right. But yeah, Guards of Atlantis too. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how many lanes it would be, but yeah, it's three players on each side, and we may even get like, we may even have two champions each or something. I don't know how it works, but I'm excited to check it out and give it a try. Um, And then my thorn here for the week, weird thing happened, and I'm not sure. I feel like this is likely because of the gift certificate signs that we have up and offers. What I was doing a massage yesterday, I guess like a prospective client just like went to open the door, even though I have signs up saying like massaging session, please be quiet. There's people in here. Don't come in here. And he just like still just tried to come in. And my immediate reaction was just like, I just yelled. I was like, yo, get out of here, man. And I could not find them. They did not call. There was no anything. So I have a feeling that I just kind of like lost the client, but at the same time, I was like, what are you doing, dude?
Yeah.
So the thorn of it all is I've just got to lock that office door. It wasn't ever something I thought about. But that happening like with a client on the table, I was like, that's probably not that good. So I'm just going to start locking that office door when I'm
Yeah.
in session.
Yeah, that sucks because like I would there's like an entryway into the office and everything like a waiting area, right?
Yeah, and then there's like signs up that say like massage in session, please do not disturb.
Yeah, like I don't know. That doesn't sound like your fault at all. I feel like I think the like you and your client who you were working on like are the losers of the situation. That guy like just fucking barging in past time like that is it's like just disrespectful. Like
Hmm.
you see massage in progress and you're like, oh yeah, I would want someone bursting in on me if I was on that table. Like, where is the thought process? Like, wait
No
a few
idea.
minutes, or if you don't have time to wait, like, shoot an email over, like, do something. Like, come on.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, we have our card there, so like you could reach out, you could email. So yeah, it was just weird, and it just frustrated me that also I was clearly never gonna find out who it was or like what it was about because like there was nobody there then.
Yeah.
So I was kind of just like, well, gosh darn. But yeah, I'm just gonna lock that door from now on when I'm in that in session, so that doesn't happen. Because yeah, that was it was an odd moment. I will say that as much,
Yeah.
or I can say I could yeah, whatever. My rose here for the week is Sarah's laptop pieces all came in. So she's got her
Nice.
headset, she's got her mouse, she's got her laptop, she's got the sweet ergonomic chair. And boy, have we been putting the hours in. Me and her have been just like flying through Outriders. I think we're
Nice.
near the end. We've come like to the temple where the storms have been coming from, and our people are all powered up, and it feels like we're like getting towards endgame. But yeah, we have just been just slaughtering through this game, dude, and it's
Nice.
amazing to see her like kind of come out of her shell and really enjoy it. And like it's cool to look over and be like, damn, like your setup is sweet, yo. She's got like really nice headphones, the mouse is cool. So yeah, now it's all come together, and I think she's really enjoying it, and that is you know, happy partner, happy life. So yeah, man, it's
Yeah.
going well.
That's awesome. Like, I think that is a very cool thing. I don't think everyone is automatically super inclined to play video games, but if you can get into some like really solid ones, some cool stories, cool graphics, whatever, it definitely can appeal. And Sarah's like played a little bit here and there previously, so I think she kind of knew that she enjoyed it, but now
Hmm.
having like the full setup and doing it, I'm sure is a blast. So
Yeah, and just like full access to like anything that she's curious, the setup that she has like can enable and like help her do that. To where
yeah,
previously, just like based on conversations, she's felt held back by this, didn't understand that, felt like and not that this is anybody's fault. Like there's with some of the people that she was around, a sense of like gatekeeping, because like they didn't really know what was going on, so they couldn't really like show her. There were all these things that she thought was cool, but like had nobody else to get into it with, so it just kind of like
Gotcha.
falls by the wayside. Or like really bad onboarding experiences from the game where like if you're just a new player to video games, just full stop, these games really don't help you.
Oh
Like
yeah.
most of them are like advanced user games where you're just kind of like loading right in. It's all like the language of the game is all kind of,
Oh yeah. Well,
you
like,
know,
I mean, as games get better, or like newer and newer, and maybe not better, just the amount of changing to everything, like settings options and things like that you might have to shift around for it to be more like I think of like keybinds on mouse and keyboard, or like if you're playing on a controller, like setting things
yep,
up a certain
that's a
way.
big one.
Like that's not easy to figure out, like, because you don't even know what keys or what actions or whatever that you can make your character do you're going to need super frequently. So like, do you bind
Right,
that to, like, you don't even know until you start playing. Then it's
right.
frustrating going through a list of like 800 different settings that you can like shift and change, or it like,
Hmm. And you're like, what does all this mean? Like,
and that's outside
shouldn't the
of
game
just
just
like,
play?
yeah, that's outside of just like actually loading up into the game and being like, okay, like, where do I need to go, what do I need to do? Like,
Yep.
League of Legends has always had a brutal barrier to entry because the amount of champions, individual abilities, items, especially prior to recommended builds and things like that they've put into
Hmm.
the game, like it's so tough. Like the only reason people really get into League, I feel like, is because because people kind of drag them into it. Like friends are like, oh, you'd really like this game, I love playing this,
Hmm.
I play it all the time. And then they're like, oh, I'll give it a shot, and the friend's always there like reassuring them like, oh no, I promise it gets fun. And in general, it is always like just League of Legends, like crazy, sometimes fun, sometimes terrible.
But I think what you're getting at is like the onboarding experience for
Yeah.
League is like actually kind of different than what the games actually look like
Oh,
and how they play
100%.
out.
Yeah.
But yeah, just thinking back, like over the last I think 3 weeks or whatever it's been, the games and or something about the games has been my rose or my seed, but it really has just been like that, like just like a wildly different life experience than we've previously been able to have. So it's just like super exciting and new and really fun. And we're like talking about Outriders all the time, and it's just super exciting. So that's why I just keep inundating you with this information. But yeah, things have been going well. That's my Rose Thorn and Seed here for the week, there, sir.
Very cool. Um, Well, getting into this week's topics, I had a couple general notes that I wanted to briefly bring up. One, because I just thought it was kind of cool, and I feel like just taking a moment to talk about it. And so, just the other day, there was a breakthrough for nuclear fusion at a U.S. Department of Energy facility. And so, basically, fusion. Is when you force two atoms to, like, you push them so hard together that they like squish together and become one thing, and it releases, because you're going from like 2 to 1, it releases a ton of energy because it like has to send like that whatever part of the atom elsewhere. So it creates a huge amount of energy, and it's very difficult to do. It takes a lot of energy to create a fusion reaction where you make these atoms combine. But this facility was able to create a fusion reaction that output 150% of the energy that they put into it. So basically, if it can be done on a better scale and whatnot, they're able to do it very consistently, like all over the country and whatnot. You can basically like squish atoms together and then create this massive amount of energy that is clean. There's no like radiation, there's no real downside, no greenhouse gases, all these things that could just kind of help out with the environment, with the earth. If we can find a way to kind of harness this, it would cut down on a ton of the bad stuff that we do to the planet. So I just thought that was interesting because it's not something that I think would I think it's a very hard to imagine kind of sci-fi thing. So I thought it was pretty cool.
Well, yeah, and that where you're leaning more on the resources that are renewable, I guess, because as we move closer to depletion of fossil fuels or things that we've previously been using to power, it's going to get tougher to upkeep what we like the status quo of living that we have. So it's cool that we're exploring other options such as nuclear, because like you're saying, it does have very promising benefits.
Yeah, and the fact that it could potentially be that option where you are creating just more energy than you're putting into it. You're not taking anything from the planet. It could potentially just extend, like you said, that status quo and allow us to just kind of not have a period where there's a gas crisis or an oil crisis or a like whatever. So maybe keep us around a little longer to enjoy the things that we like to enjoy here here on the planet. But another brief general note that I wanted to bring up, because we had talked about it in relation to League of Legends and Formula One, but FTX's former, I guess, CEO or part owner, I don't even know what he was exactly, but Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas, and he will be being extradited, I guess, most likely to the U.S. to face criminal charges in relation to the collapse of FTX. So,
and that's kind of a fascinating thing. I think, that's the I am for that result, I guess you could say. It does not seem like, I mean, because my man was speaking with everybody. I don't think that was probably indicated from the lawyers to go and just lock himself into a story time and time again. So that's man, what an unfortunate thing for so many lives. And even him just serving time is not gonna make many of these people feel whole, which is just really unfortunate, because the big fun, or not funds, but the big accounts, I think they'll end up being okay, but it ends up being the smaller accounts that lose the hardest.
Yeah, and the amount of like I kind of followed crypto a little bit, but I don't know much about it. I had tried briefly to like buy a couple of little things, and I was like, oh yeah, like I don't know, maybe this will like just go crazy. And what I bought just never did. And I was like, okay, like I don't really understand this crypto thing. I understand the concept behind it, but I've never seen like a really like valid, strong use case for cryptocurrency, like why you have to use it over money. So I mean, seeing this happen and everything, like it's just terrible because so many people like saw so much more in it than I did. They like put huge investments into it that are now just
Mm,
gone. And I'm
mm,
like, I'm glad that I did not, but I'm like, I just didn't understand it, so I didn't trust it that much. There are plenty of people that
mm-hmm.
just were like, yeah, it. Everyone says it's gonna go up, so I'm in.
Big time unfortunate. But yeah, just happy
Yeah, man.
that the I guess due process is taking its course, I guess you would say.
Yeah, just to kind of, especially to even like figure out what happened and like hopefully it will be a like something to look at for other folks who are in that kind of position. Like I think his company it like blew up faster than he would have expected. I mean, they were still using very base. From what I was reading, they're still using very basic like um, tools and like computer programs for their bookkeeping, and stuff was just like really inaccurate. It sounded like just like an amateur company that just grew so much faster than they could keep up with. And so maybe it will be a kind of warning of like, hey, if this kind of thing happens to you, you gotta make sure you're keeping your books and things in line, because it could go real bad for you and for everyone involved. So
Hmm. Yeah,
um,
big time agree on that.
yeah. But then getting over to some F1 offseason chatter. So going back to kind of that topic of reducing greenhouse gases, carbon emissions, and whatnot, F1 is they had put out a brief statement just saying how they're now 3 years into the journey to be net zero for carbon emissions by 2030, at least in relation to the cars, the fuel, things like that. Um, they said it's fantastic to see the progress that's been made already. The work that's going on behind the scenes to bring this strategy to life is tireless, and we're confident that we're building strong foundations for the future of our sport. And so, of course, with that as well, the longer F1 goes on, I think the more and more they will be continuing to look for ways to kind of keep those emissions down and keep the sport thriving. So it's impressive that they're putting all this work into, especially like the fuels that use a lot less or emit a lot less carbon emissions and things like that. I mean, testing those with the different cars and like giving that to the teams to test with their engines and all is a pretty huge step forward. So it's cool that F1 is continuing that progress going into 2023.
Yeah, it seems that with so many like there must be so many interests in so many companies that wouldn't want to work with a Formula One unless at this point they have their eyes on something like that.
Mm.
Because I know there are a lot of we'll just say like improve the ecosystem initiatives that a lot of companies are involved in. And
Including a
yeah,
lot
there's
of car
certain
companies, like
right.
tons of car
So you
companies.
would want to partner with a company that understands how much impact they could possibly have and then are working to improve that over the years where yeah we understand that it used to be this but we can still have like the same kind of racing without like polluting the atmosphere and whatever and all the rubber and all this kind of stuff.
Mm.
So yeah, I just think it's great and it makes the I mean, it's like in the title, it just makes it sustainable. It makes it something that we can do long term. It makes it something that's like as good for the communities that it's involved with as possible.
Mm.
Where, you know, there could be a lot of criticism for something like this and say, like, how much do we need this if oil crisis, fossil fuel crisis, all of these things? So it's like, well, these like racing series would have to be the first things to go because like people got
Oh
to get
yeah,
to work.
absolutely. And it's just another like interesting part being that a lot of we've talked about it before, these car companies who are involved in F1, like the knowledge and like R&D and things like that they're putting into these cars also does somewhat get handed down to like more
Mm-hmm.
commercial vehicles that are going out
Mm-hmm.
there. So the improvements on batteries and the recharging of those like they have in the F1 cars can help hybrid cars and things like that to be to have a lot better of like an energy return on those things, battery improvements, all these things going into the F1 cars can in some ways be like put into commercial vehicles. And so if they're making this progress and going towards that here, who's to say it won't shortly thereafter kind of make its way down to the everyday person and benefit on that level as well.
Yeah, and to be fair, I think that's the level that these car companies are working at, like from the R&D departments of the Formula One teams. I ultimately think that's how they get their new tech for, for their road cars and for their market cars is adapting it for consumer purposes, the stuff
Yeah.
that makes their other cars go faster. Like it's funny to see old it's funny to see the older races where like they're still topping out like max speed. They are the fastest cars, but it's only 150 kph or like 165 kph or whatever it is. But it's like now we're way past there.
Yeah.
And there's probably just road cars that could do what those F1 cars could do.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
You know.
It's a huge like shift that I think it's kind of like F1 and like the other big racing series, Formula E and everything else do kind of affect the consumer market once those new technologies are created or developed a bit
Mm-hmm.
more.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely a good thing to see. Another thing for the upcoming years, the Dutch Grand Prix will continue and be at Zandvoort until at least 2025. So a couple more years of that and a couple more years of Max with the sea of orange around him, whether he's with Red Bull, which I assume I think his contract's through 2025. But yeah, big sea of orange will continue to be there.
Now, what are the other? And this may be putting you on the spot, but what are if they would still have the Grand Prix there? Well, it may not be at the Zandvoort track, but they still have track options for a Dutch Grand Prix, correct? Or is
Um,
it just Zandvoort that they have?
I think it's just been Zandvoort, but so it's been Zandvoort, but they've changed the circuit like track a couple of different times, but it looks like it's always been at Zandvoort.
Oh, okay.
Actually, let's see here.
Yeah, if you know the answer,
Yeah,
call in. The
yeah.
phones are dead
So
right now.
yeah, so it's been Zandvoort since it started, but it's only the new track has only been going since 2021. So for the last 2 years.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
whether
So
there's changes.
if they don't want Zandvoort, that means there's no Dutch Grand Prix. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what it
Okay.
at least as far as I can tell. So
Gotcha. Well, because that could be a different conversation with say like let's say like a British Grand Prix or whatever, where okay, if it's not at Silverstone, they can still have it at the other one.
yeah, so there's options, but at least for the Dutch Grand Prix, there is not. So that's through 2025. I think it's been a cool track and cool atmosphere from what I've seen watching during the race. Lots of energy from the crowd, of course, with Max. So cool to see that continue a little bit longer. One of the other things that I thought was interesting. So there is talk of reducing the length of DRS,
Mm-hmm.
the DRS zones in the races going into 2023. And I just wanted to kind of look at that a little because I don't know. I'd be curious to see how much they're looking to change it by because it does. I don't know if that's going to be something that's going to change a ton in the races. I do think there are some tracks that have some DRS zones that are a bit too long, but I think the majority of them, at least in my opinion, are a pretty reasonable length. There are definitely tracks that even with the DRS, it still is very hard to get past because of the length of the DRS zones and everything. So I think it would really, in my mind, it's only a shift that needs to be made at a couple of different tracks that have just some really massive like DRS zone lengths. But I was like,
I
what are
think the
your thoughts?
idea,
Yeah.
based on what the article was saying, it sounds like they're trying to stop the long or the longer distance like post overtake. Like they can probably see where most overtakes happen in that DRS zone, where like so it can only open if they're a second behind. So they likely have data of, where that car is at a second ahead, where it opens that overtake slot, what speed it is. And I think what they want to avoid is because the flap doesn't slam shut after the overtake. It slams shut once they hit the brakes, which is likely another maybe 200 to 150 meters past where they got the overtake done. Yeah. So now they're still tearing down the straight after overtake with DRS open, and the person that got overtaken doesn't have the DRS. So I think they just want to stop the like overshoot advantage. Gotcha. Right?
Just like gapping someone once you're past them when you were okay, that makes
that was exactly the term that came up in the article.
Okay, I didn't read all the way through, but it does that does make a bit more sense. Another thing I would just find probably better if they're trying to create this like more competitive racing environment by doing that and all, like the tracks that have a single DRS like sensor, but then you get double DRS zones, like two short ones triggered by that one like point where you might pass the person on the first DRS, but then you have it in the second one too, but they don't because they were ahead when they hit the mark. It's like that's a weird one. I think maybe just adding another DRS, like, oh, this is the tracker or whatever that says if you have it or not, would stick a little bit, or like just have that added in so that you have that competition to fight back a little bit as well.
Yeah, no, I think that would be an interesting element. It seems spurred from the overtaking possibilities likely being stronger than their data showed them it would be in the beginning of the season. Because something you heard analysts saying over and over is just like, wow, we didn't expect how good the racing was going to be this year with the new rules and regulations.
Well, how close you can follow with like the cars getting their downforce from the floor of the car primarily, like it's so different, because that's why turbulent air like caused so many issues for these cars, and driving in it sucked so much was because you're getting like all your downforce from your wings, from the body of the car, and since that shifted, that's a huge change.
And like talking about metagame has like made it appears that has made the DRS zone like way too powerful, actually, with how strong they are at overtaking. It just like it gives them a significant advantage, where previously the DRS was just like, we probably didn't even notice that it likely wasn't a problem on the old cars. It was just giving you that advantage that you had lost due to that turbulent air. It gave them actually a chance to catch up to these other cars, where now it's like, oh no, they can just kind of race each other by itself, and then the DRS is just like kind of like a speed strip kind of thing.
Yeah, a little bit. I can see how it would be looked at as a little overkill. I guess compared to how it was before the new regulations and all. So,
I mean, the DRS, are like when they talk about shortening it, it's going to be like 25 meters, 35 meters, 50 meters here. Like we as fans likely will not notice a difference.
yeah, that's true.
Is my impression.
That's fair. I can't even. I can't say that without the signs and everything on the side of the track, I would recognize where the DRS zones were on every track from the TV like view anyway. So yeah, for the viewership, but for the drivers, it'll be interesting if they do to see if that does create more competition or if it does cause more. I'd be curious if it would cause more DRS trains because there's less opportunity for the first guy in line to get past the guy that's kind of leading that train. But DRS trains are already an issue, so I can't imagine it gets that much worse.
Right.
So hopefully that somehow improves that and everything. But the biggest, I think, off-season F1 story of this week was that officially Fred Vasseur was signed to become Ferrari's team principal, leaving Alfa Romeo. So that is a big shift, him coming in to replace Mattia Binotto. So it'll be interesting to see because I don't think we had a huge opportunity to see his kind of strategy as well because the Alfa Romeo car seemed very hit or miss throughout the season. So to see how he does as the new team principal for Ferrari will be pretty interesting.
Well, and especially for an individual who doesn't have like a ton of success in Formula One, it seems like his career has been with like back of the midfield teams and not really scoring too many like standout performances. So for a team like Ferrari that's really going to be expecting results, I'm curious why him, because currently the record doesn't show this like really winning team principle when you look back. However, experience is likely worth a whole lot, and I can't pretend to even know the like the intangibles and relationships and whatever, but just looking at where he's been previously, it's an interesting choice for a Ferrari that feels like they are just demanding a win every single weekend and putting a lot of pressure on. Is this the guy that's going to be able to deliver that? Because has he previously?
So I think in some ways he has, and so not in Formula One, but he so I kind of did some little bit of research on him and everything to find out where he came from, looking at F1 career. But he studied aeronautics engineering and then ended up creating his own junior formula team, ASM, which they started in 1996 working with Renault, and they were very competitive in the Formula 3 series in GP3. Then he and Nicholas Todd, who is Jean Tot's son. Jean Tott was, I believe, one of the FIA directors, or he was high up in something with Formula One. But yeah, his son and Fred Vasseur formed ART, who has had some extremely good drivers for them. So he's had Well, in 2005, he had won the GP2 series with ART, with Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton as his drivers. He also has had Paul di Resta, Roman Grosjean, a few other pretty famous drivers drive for the team. Um, and so, and then Nicholas Tott, his partner, um, has been the manager for a number of F1 drivers: Danny Kvyat, Felipe Massa, Pastor Maldonado, Charles Leclerc, a few others. So he's got a good partner, and both ASM and ART have been pretty competitive in their series, even though he hasn't necessarily been on a team to show that same kind of performance as an F1 team principal.
Well, that's a different view than I got. So that's interesting. So you think the success from so what so do you think with the here's a better question. So do you think with the resources that Ferrari would have access to, he may he may have had limiting factors in the other teams?
That's what I would. So the thing that when I was like reading up on it, looking into it, that I kind of felt like the only comparison that popped to my mind at first is like a typical sports coach, like a high school football coach, for instance. High school football coach coaching, wins a couple of state championships with his team, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, the local state college is looking for a new offensive coordinator. Let's bring this guy who's had success at the high school level up and see how he does. Oh, he does well at college too. Oh, well, now a bigger college is looking at him to coach for them. And then, oh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe an NFL team is like, oh, this guy's had success at all these levels. And so, him, I think, starting and having this progress in Formula 3, GP3, F2, and all, and then coming up to some teams that have had their struggles, I guess, in terms of being highly competitive. Sauber hasn't been with Alfa Romeo. Sauber hasn't been super competitive over the last few seasons. Renault has had shining moments here and there, but overall, like you said, kind of mid to the back of the midfield. So I think maybe this is just him kind of working his way up the rungs of the ladder and showing maybe some of those things that you don't necessarily see fully come out during a race or during a season, that people are like, oh, this guy, he's a good coach, good team principal. Let's give him a shot at our team when the opportunity arises. Let's take a
Mm-hmm.
shot. So
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes
I
sense.
I'm not saying by any means that he will have instant success with Ferrari, but I think it'll be interesting because he's had different opportunities and shown and proven that he's got it, and then he's had others where maybe it's a little less visible if he does or not.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hmm. Yeah, I'm just interested, obviously, to see how it goes. I think there was an immense pressure on Mattia Binotto, and likely just going to be any individual who's in that slot. It seems like a pretty hot seat to be in.
yeah.
But that's not to say. I mean, that's likely the pressure that's in all of those
Well,
positions.
and this with him, as far as I understand, he's only the team principal as
Yep.
opposed to team principal and like head engineer, chief engineer,
Hmm.
whatever, chief technical officer, I guess, like Mattia Binotto was. So hopefully, that also allows a little bit more time and energy for him to focus on the things that Ferrari needs.
Hmm. Yeah, because I think what we find is I think a little bit of differentiation of roles is good, especially when each of those roles comes with like very large workloads and large fires to put out and tough decisions to make. When you have to wear multiple of those hats, I believe your judgment begins to like diminish in quality,
Mm,
and then there's a sense in which, yeah, but you can't over differentiate because then people are left with only work to do 30% of the time or whatever, and then now you're wasting resources.
right.
So there's a sense in which, like, yeah, kind of trim the fat but also like not overburden your individuals. So yeah, changing the hats that they'll have this individual wearing from the organization perspective is quite interesting and
Mm.
likely maybe a more important piece of the puzzle than the actual individual that you have wearing the hat.
Yeah, I
What do you think
think
about
that.
that?
No, I definitely agree. I think that if you have success as Ferrari this year, which I mean, in my opinion, they should have a pretty successful year.
Mm,
They have two phenomenal drivers. They have a very
yeah.
fast race car. So if they can have someone nail down and yeah, like you said, if they have more time to spend on and focus on one very big important thing, that they're not splitting time between two very big, very important things. I think that a lot of success could be attributed to that change in leadership, like roles, and kind of dividing and conquering a little bit. But
Hmm.
also, I'm sure that some of that will be, whether it's warranted or not, attributed to the two individuals that come into those roles and split up that.
Hmm.
So I think if they are successful, then they will get more credit than maybe they actually would earn, just by doing their jobs well. But also, if
Right.
they do their jobs well because they're able to spend the right time, then that's kind of what the team's looking for. So you can't knock them for it either.
No. And just thinking of the assessment of their drivers, like Ferrari has two race winning drivers now. Previous to last year, you couldn't have said that about Carlos Sainz. So
Yeah.
I think that's like kind of a big thing where not every not every driver lineup has two race winning drivers on it. And that's like pretty lethal right now, it seems like.
Yeah, it's important to know, especially on the constructors fight, that no matter what day, either of your drivers has an opportunity to win. Obviously,
Hmm.
there's going to
Both
be
car and driver.
situations with, yeah, and that's, I think, the one of the biggest components is obviously Ferrari had a lot of struggles this past year because of their reliability issues and
Especially
everything.
right there in the mid chunk.
If they can kind of nail that down and get that, to be more consistent with the engines, get the
Hmm.
engine life to last a little longer so they're not
Mm.
taking all these grid penalties constantly,
And
then
temps down. That's what it seems like. It was a lot of
it's,
like overheating on the hot tracks, or it
I
was a lot
think,
of, I should just say, DNFs on hot tracks, I should say.
yeah, the overheating and like the not engine side, just like getting their cars to manage tires better, because that was
Mm,
also a brutal part of this last season for them, was just not being able to make certain strategies work because they couldn't get the tire life that they needed to out of the tires with their aero package and everything.
mhm.
Um, so there's definitely work to be done, but even all that said, they had a very very good year, and so this could be, a shift that really pushes them, up a little bit, gives them a little boost going into 2023. That could be huge.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree, and you just want to see them kind of capitalize on what they were able to accomplish. Because, like, yeah, even talking about some of these downsides, they still were able to put it P2 in both of the championships.
Yep.
So I think they're like kind of right there to a certain
Mm-hmm.
degree. So yeah, I think it's an interesting move. It sounds like a pretty strong move, to my uneducated brain. But
I
yeah,
think
yeah, I'm looking forward to see how it goes.
yeah, I think overall like a good decision in terms of team like just splitting up the responsibilities and everything. I think that gives them automatically a better shot.
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and yeah, I think that Fred Vassar, he's had enough successes that I think he could be a good answer to their situation and everything. So
Hmm.
um, I'm excited to see how they do. I'm excited to see if the strategy improves and whatnot because that was a struggle. So there's a lot of things that I think he has the opportunity to change and improve, and hopefully he'll be able to because that would be a very exciting fight between Red Bull, Mercedes, and Ferrari if
Hmm.
it is really constant throughout the season and no team really is able to take a um, huge front running kind of position. So
Hmm. Yeah, have a three dog race instead of a one dog race by the kind of the middle of it.
yeah, I think it's very possible. So I'm excited to see. And I had one just other final kind of off season note, and so I wanted to bring it up because I found it interesting. But Adrian Newey for Red Bull in an interview said that they waited a very long time in 2021 to start developing the 2022 car because of Max's fight in the championship with Lewis.
Yep.
So they continued to develop the 2021 car for much longer than normal. So
Hmm.
even with them starting later, kind of maybe being on the back foot initially in terms of their development, they were still able to just crush the drivers and constructors championships this past season. So it does give me a little bit of hope for them in terms of not falling too far back when it comes to um, looking at the development of the 2023 car with the reduced wind tunnel time from being constructors champion as well as the penalties that they're receiving and everything along with the budget cap or well I guess it wasn't a budget cap hit but the fine that they got.
Hmm.
So yeah, that reduction of wind tunnel time is pretty important, but with them still maintaining a competitive car, even kind of starting late last year, um, that shows that they may have the ability to rebound from that and still maintain their competitive kind of level.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I don't doubt their competitive level in the slightest
Yeah, it's.
at
I,
all.
I mean, everything obviously shifts year to year, so they could drop off more still, but I think we'll have the opportunity to see them still come out of the gates pretty hot. I think they were
Hmm.
able to have a decent bit more time preparing for the coming season this year. So so hopefully it will be like we said that competitive fight at the front with a few different teams involved.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, it's not fun to talk about the same driver week after week.
Yeah, it gets a little bit boring even if you're rooting for it. It's like I still wanted to see some exciting racing, and so
Right. A little
hopefully
bit
we'll
of.
get a bit more this coming season. But
Mm.
looking at a past season, like you said at the beginning of the episode, we were talking about doing the classic race review of the 1993 European Grand Prix where Ayrton Senna was the winner of that race at Donnington Park. But why don't you lead the people into it and kind of start off where you were looking at the race and just kind of some of the things you saw?
So I just started with the race itself. I don't like Google it. I don't
That's how I do
you
too.
know I just hit start and I just listen to what they tell me there. That's going to be relevant information for just seeing the race like as it unfolds, right? Not like to like, oh, see the podium and then be like, all right, where do these moments happen where like this is like where we get this result, right? I'm just watching the race to view it. Interestingly, the first thing I notice is the massive like Sega sponsorships everywhere. Where like, yeah,
With
I
Sonic the
understand that we
Hedgehog.
see, yeah, I understand now that we see like Formula One esports and like it's more like it's pretty common to see like video games. That was just like very like whoa. I didn't think they were a title sponsor, but I thought that was awesome. And they likely handled the franchise products back then. If there were like, if there was Formula One '93, it was likely made by Sega.
Well, there was the Grand Prix game that you could play on Atari, and also I think the like old oh, what are they called? The like Ms. Pac-Man, like the big box thing. Why am I blanking on like arcade games? I guess
Yes.
like the box arcade games with the joystick and everything. Like that Grand Prix was one of those kinds of games as well. And
But was
so
that developed by Sega?
so that may not have been, but I think in general just the like development of video games was still like getting bigger maybe, and
Mm-hmm.
so Formula One having that as a like title spot, it caught my eye immediately. I had a Sega Genesis back in the day. I like played Sonic the Hedgehog on it. It's awesome, but I did not expect to see that like come right off the bat.
So yeah, that was just whatever. It doesn't really matter. That's not about the race, but just something that caught my eye. So if you're watching this, like you're watching this race from the perspective of Ayrton Senna, for the most part, he really does kind of dominate the race. It's a
Mm.
lot about him and Alain Prost going kind of back and forth. It's a wet day there at this is the European Grand Prix at Donnington, so a lot of really, I guess you would say, like high speed turns, long straight with the chicane in turn 9, followed by another long straight with the hairpin. So like pretty like fast track, interesting track. I don't know what you would say, but wet day there at Donington. And I guess like Senna doesn't get off the line very well, but ends up making a decent amount of overtakes to put himself up into the first position. Ends up getting by what's the guy's name? Wendlinger, gets by Schumacher, gets by Hill, and gets by Prost, who are both racing for Williams at the time. And according to the cast, and I didn't know this about like the vehicles at the time. According to the cast, the Williams were the knockout, drag down
Oh
like
yeah,
heaters of that year. They were pretty quick.
they doubled the points of second place, which was McLaren. They had 168 points to McLaren's 84. So
Right.
it was not close, and there was even conversation. I was after like I said, I watched the same as you, kind of without looking up what happened.
Mm-hmm.
Just knowing, hey, I googled what are some good races to watch, and this popped up.
Mm-hmm.
So looking at it, and looking at some different interviews and whatnot, it sounded like Damon Hill and Elaine Prost were both very vocal about saying that if it's like a normal day out there, no one has a shot at beating them.
Yep.
And so this being a rainy day, which Ayrton Senna had previously won 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks earlier in Brazil in the rain as well, they were kind of like, oh yeah, no, our car is that much better. The only way anyone beats us is if it's a weird day weather wise, and
Mm-hmm.
it just happened to be. And like you said, Senna dropped back to fifth at the start, and then was able to make four passes in I think the first lap still, to
Yeah.
go all the way up to first in that opening lap and just kind of knocked it out of the park from there. It was wild.
Yeah, it was a very stellar performance. We had a couple of drivers taking each other out. We had a couple of drivers just going off to not finish the race. But the one thing that kind of characterized the race was the amount of pit stops, which was an insane 7 for the Williams driver Alain Prost, going because the conditions were so changeable. I believe they started on wets, went to dries, and then the rain started up immediately again. So within like a couple laps, pitting again for wets, and then it was just this back and forth process. So I think that characterized a lot of the race with so many pit stops. And then, heartbreak. Ayrton Senna gets stopped in the pit lane for like, what was it? Like 11, 12, like 13 seconds or something.
Like that, yeah.
It was like, slow tire coming off. You see him wrenching with it. And my man, I think in love in the moment where he literally like flips up his visor, like does like the old turnaround in the car, and then like folds his arms. He literally has time to fold his arms before they like drop it back down and he's ready to go. I'm like, no way. This guy is so mad. He is so mad right now. And like that was making me physically uncomfortable. I was like, this guy's head is getting torn off.
He is. It's just unbelievable because Ayrton Senna was an extreme, like the other guys that we're seeing, like be kind of some of the best in their sports. Like they are extreme competitors. Like he had to be so livid. I don't want to know what Brazilian swear words were coming out of his mouth there. But another interesting point talking about like the pit stops was that Ayrton Senna set a fastest lap on the fastest, and I believe it was the fastest lap for the race. He set while he was pitting. So he, in 1993, from looking at this and reading up a little afterwards, there was no pit lane speed limit. So because of the way that the pit lane is at that track at Donnington Park, you shorten the distance. So because there was no pit lane speed limit, he just flew in there and had the fastest lap by 1.3 seconds on Damon Hill, who had the second fastest in the race, because of the shorter distance and not having to slow the fuck down, which is wild. Like we've talked about looking back, when we looked back last week at the 96 Spanish Grand Prix, how with the cars going off and people hopping out of the cars, some of the safety measures and whatnot were, no one had messed up and been like, okay, yeah, this is why we need to put in this rule. So pit lane speed limit was not a rule, and they were just able to fly in there with all of those engineers. Like, I can't even imagine, especially on a rainy day, like they were coming in on there, just flying into the pit lane like, well, I hope I don't slide when I stop, and you're just cruising in there towards your engineers. That's crazy.
Well, and then the pit lanes are much less sectioned off as well. Like, it seems like there was just a lot of trust of the process where, like, you would just kind of hope people were getting out of the way as they were, like, moving stuff up and moving stuff back. Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of shenanigans going on in the pit lane. And for Senna to just say, fuck it, I'm taking the short route and literally just, like, shortcut the race, I think that's hilarious and just really heads up.
Yeah, well, it makes me
especially if there's like no rule against it.
Right, and it makes me think of, there was, I think, yellow flags in I I would have to look back. I think it was maybe Chinese Grand Prix when Seb was driving for Ferrari. So maybe like 20, I don't know, 2018, somewhere in there.
Okay.
There's yellow flags out, and a bunch of people go into pit before the safety car, and everyone's going super slow in the pit lane, and Seb just like passes them in the pit lane entry and gets to the pit lane like speed limiter right like ahead of 3 or 4 cars, because he's just like, there's no rule that I can't pass them in the pit lane. They're going too slow. Like, I'm like, we're still racing under yellow flag conditions, so I'm just going and sent it past them and everything. So it seems kind of like that, where they were just able to be like, I'm gonna take any like any advantage I can. I'm gonna if that means flying into the pit lane, that means flying into the pit lane. So
yeah, and looking at the course, you do eliminate like a massive section of it. So yeah, that's just like really heads up.
Yeah, so very interesting. Just point there, but yeah, Ayrton Senna ends up, even with that terrible pit stop, winning by a huge margin. Both the Williams cars coming in right after. Well, not right after. Ayrton Senna had lapped every single person except for Damon Hill, who was only about 6 seconds off of lapping. So, a pretty crazy drive in the wet weather. Only 11 drivers, or I guess 10 drivers finished, with one of them being like, everyone's just crazy amount of laps down. Like, there's people 6 laps down, 4 laps down, 3 laps down, and so just a huge difference in the drives that we saw throughout the race.
Yeah, it seems like the changeable conditions, and this is where that hope comes from for the drivers, where it's like, yeah, man, anything can happen. It goes kind of off the wall, and surprisingly enough, like the same thing that happened to Senna happens to Alain Prost later in the race. He gets held up in the pits, ends up giving the advantage back to Senna, because I think that 11-second stop would have been pretty bearing for him, but some other timings worked in his favor, and his pace was kind of unreal. So yeah, he was able to make those places back. And what we ended up finding in the research about the race, and why, it just becomes about, the whole day is Senna's, is that opening lap seemed to have been talked about for a decent while. Like that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, people still consider it one of the greatest opening laps of all time in terms of an F1 race, which I
the sense that I had as well. Yeah.
To like, it's different, I think, to see like you could say, oh, well, like Max had a ridiculous opening lap this year when he started in P14 and made it all the way up to like P8 by the end of the first lap. And it's like, yeah, but his car was better than all the people that he passed pretty much. In terms of this race, like, Senna had a worse car, just drove it way better in the conditions that were there, and passed a lot of cars that were fast, passed 4 cars that were probably faster than his to get up into first before that. It's a huge difference going 5th to 1st than it is going like 14 to 8. So,
and especially after a slow start, like that could just bury you for laps. You know?
Absolutely. And he did not let it, which is pretty incredible. And so a great drive. One of the I think that was on my list from last week, where I was looking at what are the kind of biggest win margins in Formula One history. That 86 seconds is definitely creeping closer towards that list of the top ones. So
yeah, pretty dominant victory there, and just a great race overall.
Yeah.
Interestingly, one of the casters said at the time Alain Prost was considered the greatest racer at that time. which I thought that was just like interesting to give like just a snapshot of the day, where obviously that conversation has changed significantly.
Well, and also talking about kind of a snapshot of the day that it came up where they were talking about the drivers early on in the race and the young Michael Schumacher coming up in and driving for the Benetton team and everything. And even though he DNF'd in this race, thinking and similarly to like last week's review where they were saying how Michael Schumacher was cementing his legacy with two world championships and kind of coming in and whatnot, and saying, oh man, like now we're going back to when he's just an starting off, and like he isn't anyone yet except for just another name out there on the grid. And so it's cool to see that. Obviously, Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, Damon Hill, 3 drivers who are considered to be just greats of their era and of F1's entirety. So seeing them all together and kind of having that, like these are some of the best we've ever seen, and now seeing where it's gone from there is pretty cool.
Yeah, I just thought that was an interesting little like time capsule thing to say. It's like, oh, okay, so this was the flavor.
Yeah, well, and there's also like even in considering it, there's only really 2 to I'd say maybe 4 drivers that you can even throw up there and say are as good, if not better. And so you can throw Michael Schumacher, you can throw Lewis Hamilton out there, you can throw Fernando Alonso, you can throw Max Verstappen. Like those are kind of the only people since that time period that I can think of that would really be in consideration to be at that same level that they were talking about here in this race. And so to go from 1993 all the way up through to 2022, and there's only 4 guys that you can like put on that level in 30 years is pretty insane.
Yeah, and even Max may be just like recency bias too.
Well, I was just saying because I think they are the only people who have matched with at least 2 drivers' championships.
Yeah.
So that's why I included him more so than necessarily longevity and proving, even though he's been successful, but like the two championships, I think if he gets another, then that definitely solidifies it, especially for folks who are not super keen on his first world championship.
Right.
So yeah, I'd say he's kind of the outlier. Alonso definitely though is I would say has to be in that consideration. So so even if you say 3 drivers, Lewis, Alonso, and Schumacher, that's even crazier over 30 years.
Right. That's one driver every 10 years.
Yeah. So kind of I guess I don't know what you consider or like what is considered when people say generational talent, but that's kind of what I would imagine is like once every 10 years or so, because I think someone who is that legend kind of level, I don't know if every 10 years might be a reasonable amount of time to say, okay.
Yeah, because you got to think also the life of athletes in general isn't that long, so
like,
it can't
to
be
last
like
that long. You kind of have to be like really damn good.
Right, that's almost like in the definition, right?
Yeah.
So about 10 to 12 years, you're likely talking. That's likely a good chunk of time to describe like an era of racing, a period of time where there's been ebbs and flows, rises and falls from a bunch of different storylines, and you can really get like a taste and a flavor for what happened. Yeah, probably about 10 to 12 years sounds right to me.
Yeah, because it always amuses me when people like how I feel like that term gets thrown out a lot. Like I've heard
Sure.
people
It's just like
call
goat.
Max a generational talent and Leclerc a generational talent and Lando a generational talent, and I'm like they can't all be they're all the same generation, and not
Hey,
that like to say that multiple people can't overlap and be that, but you can't just throw it out for any guy who's like young and good. Like
right.
that it seems like it's become a synonym for that as opposed to like I think the goat talk is like okay, it's up in the air, like it's a conversation who's the best, but
Mm-hmm.
um but yeah, generational talent I feel like is one that gets thrown around a bit too much.
Yeah, and if anything, I think that's yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But
Maybe overused. I agree with you.
yeah, the goat thing's interesting. Just a side note because I saw a video the other day and it made me think. But I saw a TikTok where this guy, someone was asking like, "What's your unpopular sports opinion?" And this guy said that there's only like Wayne Gretzky is the only person that like in any sport that you can 100% say is the goat of their sport, where there's no arguments, there's no like controversy. Like basketball, everyone's like, oh, is it Michael Jordan, is it LeBron? In baseball, people Barry Bonds or Hank Aaron or Babe Ruth, like who's the guy in Formula One, Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton,
Mm-hmm.
tennis, oh Roger
Federer,
Federer,
Nadal.
Nadal, like every sport has one, and hockey, it's just the answer is Wayne Gretzky. Like Wayne Gretzky has records in hockey that the idea of anyone ever surpassing them is just it in most people's brain is like physically impossible. And so
How many championships does he have?
championships not I don't know if he has the most, but his records in terms
Because
of
that's probably where that viewpoint doesn't hold up.
well I but
I understand the records thing, but every other conversation comes down to, yeah, but who has more championships with how many different teams?
so
Or
that
with like a loyalty bias.
so I would say it doesn't come up as much in like it does in basketball and like baseball and things like that, but
American football.
it is not.
Like they talk about the Tom Brady rings all the time.
Yeah, but I think that in hockey, more than some sports, there are players who. So, like, looking at the top winners of Stanley Cups in NHL history, I just pulled it up, and I've been a hockey fan my entire life. I know like three of these guys in the top
Okay.
10. Like I
Okay.
like
Where's he at in the top 10?
he's not in it. But a number of these guys that are in it are just role players who happen to be on dominant teams and were just like they could have been a third line guy who just like the team kept while the team was just like crazy dominant, not necessarily
Right.
the like all-star player or the best guy out on the ice, just like they played their position fine and they were with a team for a long time that was dominant or ended up on a
Mm-hmm.
couple teams that won a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Like Wayne Gretzky is not in the top 10, and the top the top guy
I
won.
lost you.
Oh, can you? Am I here?
I can hear you. Now
Okay.
you're good. Go ahead.
But the top guy won 11 Stanley Cups, and the bottom of the top 10 won 6.
Gotcha.
So it like declines pretty quickly. Wayne Gretzky, his records are just like hard to imagine anyone touching. So like NHL goal record, Wayne Gretzky has 894 goals. Second on the list has 801. Third on the list has 800. Alex Ovechkin just scored his 800th goal yesterday, I think.
Gotcha.
So those are the top 3
So that's like within reach.
for the goal record.
Okay.
So if you take away points in hockey are how many goals and how many assists you have in your career.
Right. Right.
If you take away, so Wayne Gretzky's number 1 in goals. If you take away his goals from his career points, he still trounces second place and third place in points purely from assists.
Wow.
He has 1,963 career assists. Second place in points total, as opposed to just assists, has 113 less points than Wayne Gretzky has purely in assists. Alex Ovechkin, who is currently the third place in goals, could potentially reach that goal record. He would have to have 2 to 3 like really good seasons, and he's getting pretty old. Still not out of reach for goals, but for the points record, he would be, even if he beats Wayne Gretzky's goal record and takes the top mark there, he's currently basically doubled in points total by Wayne Gretzky.
Okay, so his like in-game production was just insane.
It seems physically impossible for anyone to meet it. So Wayne Gretzky's career points are 2,857.
Right.
Alex Ovechkin, who's still playing in third, is at 1,444. So almost essentially half.
Whoa.
And has played 90% the amount of games that Wayne Gretzky played. And is only half the like production in terms of goals that he had. So like it is an astronomical level, which I just like.
Yeah, that's a pretty good breakdown of
I had never thought
other
of it,
things mattering.
I had never thought of it in that scale because I'd always, if the question was ever posed of who's the GOAT of hockey, you just say Wayne Gretzky. Like it just is what it is. There are plenty of great names out there, and legends, but he is like the guy. And when you talk about any other sport, there's always this conversation. And like looking from 1993 constructors and this race at the European Grand Prix all the way up through now, like even from then, there's 2 guys that easily surpass these guys.
Right.
Which is
but there's only one guy who's even coming close, and it's like not even close.
Exactly.
Right, I understand.
So it's cool looking and kind of comparing sports. It made me like thinking about that and comparing to F1 and our like goats that we're looking at and everything. Made me feel a little like Thorin for a hot second, where I'm like, oh, I'm referencing other sports while I'm talking about this other thing that
There you go, man.
This other competition that
we learned from the best.
So yeah, Thorin. I'm glad to not have his toxicity and just his affinity for comparison. So.
I don't know if he's toxic. I think he just says the thing that we're all thinking.
No, not toxic. He's not tactful. He
Oh,
doesn't
sure.
care about anyone's feelings when he's putting his opinions out there, and he always has strong reasoning for his opinions. So I'm not
Yeah.
like knocking him for that, but he's definitely not a tactful man,
No, he does make well-reasoned arguments, though.
and it's entertaining.
Yeah, that's for damn sure.
But I think that's kind of all the notes that I had relating to the 1993
Sure.
European Grand Prix review. But hopefully, I think we still have a little bit of time this off season, so I would expect a couple more of these probably as we're getting leading up into the 2023 F1 season.
Yeah, a little bit of context from where we were to better inform where we are and where we're going, looking ahead into the 2023 season. But yeah, that's just kind of our take on the 1993 European Grand Prix at Donnington Park. Yeah, I thought it was a great race. That first lap from Senna was pretty amazing. Before we talked about the race, we were talking about some off-season stuff. There's a long list of names that are moving and shaking between regions, between teams, but there was one that stood out to me more than anything. What do you think about the mid laner for RNG, Xiaohu, leaving and going to Weibo Gaming?
Ugh, that I think is, I mean, exciting for Weibo Gaming.
Big time.
Just looking at the LPL, Weibo was one of the teams that had some very good success this past year. They were in the top, just pulling it up, they were in the top six going into LPL playoffs at the end of summer. And they also have some really, really good players on the team. So right now, only 3 confirmed, but they have Xiaohu, the Shy, and Angel. Angel being their secondary mid laner. But if they keep some of the players that they've had or bring some new players in, I think just Xiaohu and the Shy are 2 extremely solid pieces of the puzzle to build around. And so I think that is a great move for Weibo Gaming. I don't know if it will. I guess we'll have to see how much it hurts RNG, because Xiaohu has been a big component of their team for years now between his time in the mid lane and in the top lane. So
Yeah.
that's definitely gonna hurt. I mean, they still with Breathe, Wei, Gala, and Ming are still a strong team, but it's definitely gonna be a hard replacement for that mid lane.
Yeah, and one has not been found, at least as of recording, one has not been found yet. And yet that sounds like the type of roster move that means RNG is going to be trying to build just a new system. Because I know based on their drafts, RNG played heavily around Xiaohu. Xiaohu was a big part of their shot calling and just about how they moved on the map.
Yeah.
A lot of Galio, a lot of champions that could influence the side lanes and could help out.
Twisted Fate, loving those opportunities to play the supportive mid laner. So
and help out Wei, who is jungling very aggressively.
Yeah, I think that I don't think that there are a ton of people who could just step in immediately and fill that spot.
Right. Well, that's why it seems like they're going to be looking to maybe build a system around another player. Maybe they'll look to, be more bot lane focused or, top side focused or whatever it is. But yeah, that's just a tough one. And like I said, in the list of names that's moving, that one really stood out. I was like, eesh, Weibo Gaming is definitely making out in that one where I don't see a good slot in for RNG currently.
Yeah, I think the only person that I could think of that might fit into that would be if they would be, or if they were able to get Doonby
Yeah.
somehow. I think since he, I believe, is currently not re-signed, but he hasn't signed anywhere yet. I think his contract just ran out. Um, he's the most similar in terms of like the roaming capacity, the supportive mid laner, and that kind of position that could fill. So I agree. I think that's gonna kind of either force them to slot someone in who's maybe a lesser version of Xiaohu, or if they can get Doonby, maybe a side trade, or have to retool kind of their game plan and strategy, which
Hmm.
could be very very difficult. That's a
Yeah,
hard thing to do.
especially from a team that they win MSI, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Last year, get pretty not the results they would have wanted at Worlds in the follow up, and then yeah, looking to make some big changes. It seems so. That's
Well,
just like an interesting one.
and Xiaohu has been there with the team since summer 2015. So he was
Hmm.
there with them for what is that? That's 7.5 seasons, which is just
That's
pretty
14
crazy.
splits,
That is.
multiple Demacia Cups.
It's a lot of time, and so RNG is gonna have to make some shifts. I mean, Ming has been there with them for quite some time since spring 2017, so he's been there and can hopefully be kind of their rock to
Hmm.
to continue to lead. And of course, coming from the support role, that definitely does help in terms of the like kind of team leading, but
Hmm.
it's going to be a difficult change, I would imagine. Um, and Wei, Gala, and Ming, all of their contracts are also, I guess, have not been renewed yet. So
Hmm.
there's still could be some other rebuilding that ends up happening.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just a lot of interesting elements to this one. But that was all I wanted to say with that. Other than that, I just have a couple of little magic notes that the more I'm thinking about it, it's probably more of a therapy note than a magic note. But if you want to hear about it.
Hey, let's hit it. Let's hear about it. Spill,
Uh,
talk out your feelings, Justin. What's
I will
going
do
on?
my best here. I will do my best without making any of the involved parties feel bad. We had 3 games on Monday, and Connor brought his fresh new commander deck, mono green list. He was playing a commander called Baru the Worm Speaker. So it gives all worms +2/+2 and trample, and then with an activated ability, he can like make worms and put them onto the battlefield. So just like massive creatures, just trying to beat face and just like take your health total down very quickly. So we got to see 3 games on that from Connor, and it was interesting because obviously, like he becomes more and more familiar with it, gets to see the card choices that he's made and like how they actually interact in the game. So I think getting 3 games in a night, that gives you a lot of data. He was already talking about like possible swaps, maybe needing more of this, less of that. So that was all very interesting. There's a worm from a set called Battle Bond, which is like a couple years old at this point. There's a card in there called Grothama the All Devouring, and it offers this like little mini game that you can do in combat, and it is genuinely confusing and hard to know how to best take advantage of it, especially
Yeah,
when it's something that's triggering like every combat. Like it happens like you have the opportunity to interact with it
Ooh,
like every turn cycle.
that
So,
sounds fucking rough. Because I know you've talked about different cards that are played that you've had to be like, okay, so we had to stop and kind of like work through the each individual interaction and see how they prioritized and whatnot to get through it. But that's like a one play kind of thing, not like an
mhm.
every turn kind of thing.
And it wasn't like it wasn't like intricate interactions. It was just kind of all of us not really either being able to explain it to Connor, or maybe we didn't understand how the triggers worked like ourselves that well. But it ended up being this thing that kept coming up during the combat step. And we were at a point in one of the games where we were either going to play with like takesy backsies or we weren't. And we don't really do that to a certain degree. Like, even with Connor as a new player, we're
Mm,
just kind of hoping like we can explain things the best we can. But overall, like, we want to keep the board state moving forward. We got to a point where I engage with the Grothama, this worm side quest creature thing. I engage with it in a way where I got all the advantage and he was gonna get none. And Connor was like, wait, can I? And I was like, no, dude, we've explained this. Can we just get on with it?
mm.
And
It
that was my mistake. I I reacted instead of like taking time to then like respond, right?
mm.
But go ahead, what were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say I like it's not the easy. I don't know. I feel for you, like, and think, yeah, like, you're saying you responded wrong, like, you out of instinct, because I do that a lot, so I can relate. That's, like, something I've had to work on for a long time, is, like,
Mm-hmm.
immediately reacting to things. And so it's very tough when you're also kind of like I would imagine it's frustrating, like this thing like constantly making you guys go through this thing, but also like you only have, and you've talked about it, a finite time that you're usually able to play, and like someone has the cutoff of like X amount of time, and you want to get as much play in as you can. So like between that and this slowing the process down, along with the probable frustration of like this is a really annoying thing to have to figure out again and again and again, like I
Mm-hmm.
can understand why that was like a bit tedious and got a reaction.
That's like a good word for it, but like actually, and I'm gaining this in the moment, is what I'm actually learning is I'm probably just not that good like around new players, especially in a game
Mm,
that like I am competitively invested in. I'm thinking about like playing optimally and information and like making sure all the triggers go off and
mm,
are things interacting right, where I think I'm so like rules and just game minded, where I'm coming from a perspective of like I want to play and I want to
yeah.
win. So yeah, I think what I'm learning is I may just not be that
Well,
good for like the new player experience in like trying to help him learn, because what he really needs there is someone like to help him like play the cards, right?
yeah, and be
Not like
like,
yell at
kind of
him.
talk to him on the side and be like, yeah, like, okay, like,
Yeah.
let me look at, okay, you've got this option, like, oh, this is your best thing.
Yeah.
But that's also like that's part of the learning process from a new person. Like, I don't know, I don't, I understand why you would feel like you're maybe a little too harsh, but at the same time, um, I think you've also shown in other circumstances that you guys have brought new players in and been able to be like, okay, we're just setting the competitive level a little differently, and you've adjusted. It doesn't like it didn't ever sound like you were not capable of working with new people coming in. It sounds like it was a frustrating card to deal with in the situation, and it just was like maybe the expectation you had coming in based on previous like games with him, maybe set your expectation a little higher, and then this circumstance is kind of one of those weird ones where it's like, well, everyone was having to think about this, so a new guy is definitely gonna like have to think about this. And you've played with Connor before, so it's like
and not just in Magic as well.
Yeah, so you've seen that he has like a certain level, and this one maybe was just like not where the level you've seen before because of this weird thing. So I wouldn't necessarily reflect on it as like you can't handle, because when like Brett came in or like anyone else that you've added to the pod and had kind of join, they were playing with very basic decks and not knowing what it was. When you taught me how to play and like cards and how they work and everything,
this is true.
So I wouldn't necessarily knock it on that. It just sounds like it was a frustrating kind of scenario especially to keep revisiting like turn after turn. So
definitely will take it in stride here. I think you've kind of helped me parse through it a little bit, but yeah, it was
exactly. You said, this is therapy, man.
yeah. So that was an interesting moment. Hope I didn't sour Connor from the big worms. But then in game 3, boy, I was chapped, but quickly reined it in and realized like, we all make mistakes. This literally could have been any of us. Let's whatever. We'll keep it moving. In game 3, I had a, I don't want to say commanding board state because I wasn't winning, but I had a board state that could win, and I made a play on one of the turns that would have taken Ian out. He interacted, kept himself alive, kept the game moving. I attempted it again on the following turn. He wanted to make the same interaction, realized he couldn't do it at instant speed. So he would have been dead the previous turn.
Oh.
Like changing the whole landscape.
So you, like, instead of wasting another turn attacking him, could have, like, turned that on someone else, or...
And not just me. Jason would have had access to different decisions, and Connor would have had access to different decisions. Like, just the whole gamescape changes, right?
Yeah.
And so we realized that I immediately was like, wait, you can't do that. And then I was like, wait, so that means, and then he was like, oh, fuck. And I pretty much just like threw my cards down. I was like, yeah, well, fuck this. Like, that's lame. And it obviously scuffs the results of the game. I even like called out Jason like was going to play out his turn. I was like, why are you playing out your turn? Like, the game's over. Like, Ian fucked it all for us. And we were all kind of in a sense of like, we all wanted the game to end like properly. Like, these were all great fun games. Like, that was the main thing. But it was like a very competitive game, and it just, it all goes out the window.
Everything's fucked. Like, you can't unfuck it.
And like the particular flavor from me was, well, I thought I was going to win. So I thought, like, it was a direct, like, oh, no, I could have won.
You would have been on an even better track to win then.
Yeah.
And
but that was what I quickly dispensed with. I was like, that doesn't matter. That's not what I should care about. And so I guess the light here is I was just quickly able to get out of the, like, kind of fuck this mentality and was just
Okay.
able to be like, all right, that was just a fun game, whatever. It could be any of us. Because I just started thinking of like all the times I've made mistakes and like, yeah, whatever. It's just a game.
Yeah.
So yeah, very
That's
quickly it
good.
was just back to the GGs and whatever. Now we know for next time.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, I was so fucking close to winning that game. I was pissed. I was like, God damn it, Ian! God damn it!
Oh yeah, and like because it changes so much. Because my initial thought was like, everyone just picks up the cards that they play for. But then I'm like, but then everyone knows what cards everyone has, and then
Well, and it's
like
not just that,
knows
it's like damage and triggers and like this gets sent that way, this gets sent that way. Oh wait, no, it
yeah,
wouldn't have happened like that. Like it's so many
you have to
things.
rewind a lot, and yeah.
Yeah,
So I my initial thought was like, and then I was like, no, you just can't. So you either
pretty
play with it
pretty
like
gone.
as is, or you're just like, it's fucked. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah,
At least
definitely.
Corvold doesn't get another W for Jason. If I don't win, that means they didn't win either, so that's okay. Their numbers don't go up. I can live with that.
There you
But
go.
yeah, that was just my Magic games here for the week. Just
Yeah,
excited to talk about them a little bit because I think that was pretty interesting. But
definitely.
other than that, good sir, just give me your flavor of the week here. We can get these people out of here.
Sounds good. So for my food this week, twice this week now, I have made some homemade spicy chicken sandwiches and some truffle
Oh,
fries in the air fryer. So I've been doing some seasoning on the chicken with the flour. I do egg mixed with like whipping cream and some hot sauce for the like inside layer, and then some breadcrumbs and crushed red pepper on the outside. So
hell yeah.
that was really good. We enjoy doing truffle fries too with the I had gotten Colleen truffle oil last year for Christmas, and so we're using it less sparingly. We've made it last like a whole year, and I'm like, why did I not use this as much? Like we still have plenty of it. Like it's fine.
Hmm.
But it's a nice little treat to have with that and everything. So that is since we did it a couple times and it was pretty good. I got better the second time. So that was my food for this week. My music, it is now the Christmas season a bit more for me. So we have the Christmas music going on at work on the kind of background music playlist in the office and the lobby and everything. But my Colleen and I have our non-traditional music Christmas music playlist that has like DMX and Snoop Dogg and like a bunch of just kind of more obscure Christmas songs or ones that we find funny. Justin Bieber Mistletoe is hilarious because shoddy with you is a line that will just never age well for the Christmas music genre. And I find it absolutely hilarious.
Oh
So,
man.
so I love our non-traditional Christmas music playlist because I I get bored of the same old songs that you
Yeah.
hear on the songs that I hear on my Pandora mix that we play at work every day. It's the same Christmas music all the time. It'll be the same next year. So
Hmm.
I enjoy our non-traditional music playlist and have
There you go.
messed around with it a little bit. And then for my visual medium, the conclusion to White Lotus season 2 just happened this past week. It is
Well,
the show that I talked about previously for the first season that was about the hotel in Hawaii, and I could relate to all the people who were working and like how much the clients and guests were assholes and it was difficult and whatnot. This one a little different. It's in Italy, so you're seeing it at an international hotel, which I is definitely different from a hotel in America.
hmm.
But the storyline continues. There's a couple of characters that carry over, but it is a very fun show. They kind of lead you into the season with a little clip basically saying that there are 3 people found dead at the beach at this resort, and then it flashes back to the beginning of the week, and you're kind of watching and guessing the entire time about which characters, who, what happens to, yada yada yada. And they do a very compelling job of creating characters and building their character arcs throughout the season, and kind of making you love or hate them kind of as the season goes on very well. So their character development is very good. The show, it takes a while to kind of piece together all the puzzle, and so that is was really enjoyable. It's on HBO, so definitely worth checking out. So White Lotus season 2 is my visual medium, and those are my flavor of the week.
Very cool. That's yeah, I've heard some pretty good things about White Lotus. That may be one to check out. That's interesting.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. But what have you been watching and listening to, eating? What has Sarah made for you this week that is
Oh,
just top notch?
of course, yeah. She feeds me well. She made some ham and bean soup. We got a big old bone from her family. So we let that just stew all day, and we get some nice ham and bean soup. It
Love it.
is super tasty. So we've been munching on that, which has been very
That
good.
bone broth has to be banging.
Exactly. That's what it is. My visual medium here, and not to be like contrarian or anything, but Sarah's been watching it. I believe she's watched some of it previously. So I'm catching it like in decent sized chunks. Game of Thrones. I
Okay.
don't get it.
Which is she watching, the new show or the original
The
show?
original show starting at
Okay.
season 1, so I'm seeing like developing moments and characters and stuff. Like I
It
don't.
it's a tough. I will say it's a tough show. I don't think you're being contrarian. I think it's a tough show to only catch bits and pieces of, because there
Mhm.
are like 10 different storylines that are going on, and you don't get every single one of them every week. So
Mhm.
it can be tough to like see the progression of stories when there's like that many ones that you're splitting attention, and you're only
Right.
catching bits and pieces, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that makes sense. I have to say, some of the acting isn't as strong as I may have believed with how sold the show is. Some of the acting is like kind of meh. Just
It gets
I
better,
guess.
I will
Oh,
say. It
fair
does.
enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. I guess overall, I it just isn't what I would have imagined it to be. And then even more, I'm like, I don't know. I think I would have to be previously invested in this storyline in some way for me to like whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Well,
just an odd one. Go ahead.
well, no, I can understand that a bit, because I'll give a little shout out to Shane right here. My buddy tried to watch for like 1 to 2 full seasons and still didn't
Hmm.
know anyone's name, because there were so many characters, and just had nicknames for all of them because he couldn't
Hmm.
remember their names. So like
Yeah.
it's it can be tough early on, especially. Like it is, I would say, like it's relatable to like, I guess, any other like huge universe type thing. Like if you just jump into the first Avengers movie or something, and you're seeing all these different superheroes, and you're just like, whoa, where did all these people come from? Like with no, or with very little backstory. It takes a little time to kind of uh figure it out and keep it like straight in your head a little bit.
Hmm. It is
So
funny just coming in from an appointment and just like seeing boobs on the television. That's really funny. But yeah, Game of Thrones.
happens.
I don't get it. Maybe I'll figure it out. But then my music here for the week. I've been thinking about the album The Mollusk
Okay.
from Ween.
I
Have you
don't
ever heard this album?
I have not.
It's kooky. I can't oversell it. I can't say it's good. I'm not gonna say anything, but it
The
is an album.
Mollusk by Ween.
Yeah, it's something. I've put a lot of listens into it actually, and quite thoroughly enjoy it. One of the not title tracks, but one of the more popular tracks on it. It's called Ocean Man. You may actually know it, but everything else is kind of kooky. Blarney Stone is a standout of mine, and Waving My Dick in the Wind. Just a great album. And for whatever reason, I've been thinking about it this week, and some of those songs have been rattling around in my head. So
Okay.
if you're feeling adventurous, go check it out. And honestly, I think you might like it.
Hey,
Yeah,
I'm willing to
Demolish
give
by
that.
Weed.
I'm willing to give it a shot. I don't typically turn things down without trying them. So
Mhm.
I may just give that a listen to and have an update on whether I like it or not.
I'd be very interested in that.
But it sounds like just name an artist I've never heard of sounds like a interesting combination. How old is this album?
Maybe 2007.
Okay, so this one has aged a little bit.
Uh,
It's
yeah.
it's like a fine wine now, right?
Yes. Yes. It
Good
really
comparison.
only has gotten better. Oh, no, 97. So even
God.
older.
So it's getting close to my age, so that's good things.
It's a multi-genre concept album with a dark nautical theme
Interesting.
from 97.
I will have to give it a shot. But it sounds like that does wrap up the flavor of the
I
week.
think so.
That brings us to the end of this week's episode as well. I do have I completely whiffed on telling you these things at the beginning, so I briefly just wanted to say my nephew is here. He was born last week, which is cool. So I'm now officially an uncle by blood. And have my little baby nephew. I got to meet him on
Nice.
Saturday, which was
Congratulations.
which was neat.
Wait, so that's from your brother Nate?
No, from my sister. So
Okay.
so it was interesting. Like, my sister's fiance, like, I came by, was like, wanted to see them, meet the baby and all, and he like scooped the baby up and was like, here, and I'm like, oh my god, that is very aggressive for passing over this tiny baby that was born a day before. I was like, you are like handing this off like a football, not like a baby. And I was like, oh my god. But it
Oh, at least you were prepared.
I didn't didn't feel it when he initially handed it off, but I held the baby, didn't drop it. So it will hopefully be better off than I was. No. But that was a cool thing from this week. And I also forgot, I also got to go to the Eagles game, which was my first NFL game. It was a very cold, rainy one up in the Meadowlands outside of New York. But just two cool highlights I wanted to make sure I shouted out.
Yeah, highlights indeed. That's awesome.
Yeah. So a fun week, and of course a fun episode for this week as well. So as always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Hit us up on Twitter at tall and short of 1. Always happy to hear what's going on with people's flavor of the week, what your rose, thorn, and seed are. But of course, thank you for listening and taking the time.
Yeah, just tell your friends. New episodes every Thursday, obviously. But this has been another Tall and Short of It podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Peace out, everyone.
Later.